Chapter 1576. Chongming Gang patiently tried to ease their relationship for a few days. On the third day, he finally couldn't take it anymore. That day, when they were having dinner, he couldn't help but ask, "Yuji, the Chong Group has a big project plan in the next 2 days. All the major shareholders need to vote together. Do you have time to go to the company?" He was really afraid that his daughter would say, "Just let uncle go." Fortunately, she didn't. Gu Xingyin just nodded casually. "No problem." Chongming let out a sigh of relief. He seemed to be advising and warning his daughter at the same time. "Yuji, the 30% shares in your hands are very important. You can't sell it to anyone. Do you understand? If anyone wants to buy it, you have to tell me." It finally came. Gu Xingyin put down the bowl in her hand and wiped her mouth with a wet tissue. "Dad, don't worry. I know what's important and what's not." Chongming Gang nodded with relief and said casually, "If you think it's troublesome, I can manage it for you. It's not a problem." Gu Xingyin rolled her eyes in her heart. She thought that Chongming Gang would at least say something in exchange, but from his tone, it seemed like he wanted to take her shares for free without offering anything? And under the name of managing it for her? Did he think Chongming Yuji was a fool? She immediately smiled. "It's not troublesome. Anyway, I'm just a leisurely shareholder. I just get dividends and do nothing, right?" Seeing that she didn't answer, Chongming Gang wasn't thick-skinned enough to continue asking. This conversation was left unsettled. Gu Xingyin felt that she should check the calendar before going out today. At noon, she was disgusted by Chongming Gang. Not long after she went out, she met Zhong Qing on the road. This person was holding a bouquet of delicate red roses in his hand and directly blocked her on the road. "Yuji, I love you. After such a long time, your anger should have subsided. Can you forgive me?" Zhong Qing's face was full of affection. He directly confessed to Gu Xingyin on the streets. This guy looked like a dog, drove a luxury car worth millions, and was even holding a bouquet of red roses in his hand. It was obvious that he was about to stir up trouble, and he quickly attracted the attention of most of the passers-by. Especially when some passers-by recognized that this tall, rich, and handsome man was the young master of the Zhong family. As soon as these words came out, the passers-by who didn't know were even more enlightened. Oh, he really is a tall, rich, and handsome man. Such a scene was probably one of the most romantic scenes in the hearts of most little girls who were filled with fantasies. However, as one of the parties involved, Gu Xingyin said that she only had one word in her heart, motherfucker, but she didn't know if she should say it. If she had Zhong Qing in her heart, then so be it. At most, it would be a high-profile public display of affection. It was nothing. However, the problem was that this man had been caught cheating on her not long ago. She had already made it clear that the two of them were finished. How could he be so shameless as to do such a thing? Gu Xingyin was sick of it. There were already many spectators gathered by the side, and some people had already started to jeer for Gu Xingyin to agree. These people didn't even know what was going on. They were only there to watch the show. Zhong Qing had deliberately chosen this kind of place. He was also a little scheming. Most girls were thin-skinned. Under such circumstances, with the crowd jeering, it was easy for them to agree. Chapter 1577. However, Gu Xingyin was not an ordinary young girl. She was not willing to give Zhong Qing face. She looked at Zhong Qing coldly. "I thought we had made it very clear. Zhong Qing, it's over between you and me." Zhong Qing did not take this sentence to heart. He still looked at Gu Xingyin affectionately. "I know that you are angry with me. I have been regretting it all this time. I really know that I was wrong. Please give me another chance. Yuji, give me another chance. Let's get married right away, okay?" As he said this, he actually took out an exquisite box from his pocket. He changed from repentance to a proposal. This scene made the eyes of the passers-by turn red. Originally, Zhong Cheng's appearance was the kind that could easily arouse people's good feelings. In addition, he was the son of a rich family. Many passers-by felt that it was really rare for such a tall, rich, and handsome man to do this for a girl. There were young people in the crowd shouting, "Say yes, marry him," and so on. When Lu drove past here, he was attracted by this place. He had never cared about this kind of bustle. However, when he passed by, an auntie who was watching the show in the innermost part seemed to have something to do. She answered the phone and struggled to squeeze out a gap in the crowd. Just at this moment, He-Lu saw Gu Shengyin in the middle of the crowd clearly. It seemed that she was the heroine of the bustle. The crowd squeezed forward again. He-Lu frowned. After a few seconds of silence, he decisively found an empty spot. After parking the car, he walked toward the crowd. In the crowd, Gu Shengyin listened to the jeering of the people around and did not panic at all. She raised her head and coldly swept her gaze across her surroundings. This gaze was so imposing that many people subconsciously shut their mouths. And the passers-by around saw her appearance so carefully for the first time. What a beautiful girl! No wonder Zhong Cheng, such a rich man, liked her so much. Gu Shengyin glanced at the expensive diamond ring in Zhong Cheng's hand and said coldly, "Keep your things. Zhong Cheng, when you cheated on me, I made it clear that we were finished. I don't believe you, and I'm not interested. Don't insult me with marriage. If I marry someone like you, I'll feel disgusted for the rest of my life." Cheating. The passers-by finally understood why this girl had not relented. He actually had such a criminal record. Many of the passers-by who were clamoring for Gu Shengyin to agree shut their mouths. Of course, there were also some people who felt that as a man, how could there be a time when he did not cheat? It was already good enough that he could admit his mistakes and change. Zhong Cheng seemed to be able to sense that there were many unreadable gazes around him. He did not expect that Gu Shengyin would not give him any face and expose his shortcomings in public. Looking at this, she really had no intention of reconciling with him. He gritted his teeth and looked at Gu Shengyin. "We really don't have any chance?" Gu Shengyin was silent. Her attitude could not be more obvious. The crowd did not know where the laughter and boos came from, as if they were laughing at Zhong Cheng. Zhong Cheng's face turned red, and he looked at Gu Shengyin with hatred. "Chang Yuji, I've humbled myself and begged for your forgiveness today, but you didn't even bother to acknowledge me. One day, you will regret it." Chapter 1578. Gu Shengyin said lightly, "What will happen to me in the future, you don't have to worry about it." Zhong Cheng glanced at the delicate red rose in his hand. He had carefully prepared it for today, but looking at it now, it seemed that there was no need for it. He threw the bouquet on the ground. "Zhong Yuji, you will find that you can't find a man who loves you more than me. A woman like you doesn't have a heart. Even when you were with me, you didn't love me." That was a little too much. Gu Shengyin didn't expect that Zhong Cheng would be so ungentlemanly after being angry. She frowned. "Zhong Cheng, you are the one who cheated on me first. Don't say that you love me after doing such a thing. This kind of love, Heavy Rain Ji, cannot afford. I have never done anything wrong to you. We can part on good terms. At most, we won't be friends in the future. Do you want to be my enemy? A woman like me doesn't have a heart. It's none of your business. Whoever I fall in love with has nothing to do with you." Gu Shengyin felt that he must have been out of his mind to try to reason with such a narcissistic idiot. She turned around and looked at the passers-by around her. She didn't even want to maintain the smile on her face. "Excuse me, let me pass, okay?" She didn't know that her right arm was pulled by someone as soon as she left. Gu Shengyin turned her head. Zhong Cheng's red eyes appeared in front of her. Gu Shengyin frowned. He doesn't look right? But she didn't have the mood to study this. She tried to shake him off but failed. She said coldly, "Let go of me." Zhong Cheng just stared at her as if he didn't hear it. "What do you mean by what you just said? Whoever you fall in love with has nothing to do with me? Who do you fall in love with? Do you have someone else in your heart, so you want to break up with me?" Gu Shengyin's mood at the moment was like 10,000 curses running through her heart. She barely managed to maintain her composure and didn't swear in public, but her expression had truly turned cold. "Zhong Cheng, you're the one who cheated on me when we were dating. You need to be clear about one thing. You are the one who wronged me, not the other way around. This planet doesn't revolve around you. Why are you still thinking about such meaningless things at this time? Are you sick?" She didn't expect that her words would trigger an invisible switch, and Zhong Cheng's eyes instantly went wild. Gu Xingyin could only feel the pain in his arm. Zhong Qing muttered to himself, "Sick? Ah, I am sick. You woman, I love you so much, but you won't forgive me. You woman." Gu Xingyin's heart skipped a beat. Zhong Cheng's behavior was clearly abnormal. Could it be that he really had some sort of mental illness? The passers-by who were closer to the scene probably noticed that something was wrong. Gu Xingyin shouted to the people next to her, "He's not normal. Come and help me pull him away." Several young men heard the words and came over. Zhong Cheng suddenly pulled Gu Xingyin's body and threw her to the ground. "Indifferent woman, go to hell." Gu Xingyin felt the strength and could only try to hold her head with both hands. It would probably hurt a lot. But the expected pain didn't come. Chapter 1579. Gu Xingyin only felt something pulling her arm, and then due to inertia, her whole body fell into a cool embrace. The familiar fragrance of the lotus instantly enveloped her, making her feel at ease. Gu Xingyin opened her eyes and met He Lu's eyes with a trace of concern. "Are you okay?" she asked in a low voice. Gu Xingyin shook her head. "Thank you for arriving in time." He Lu let go of her, and Gu Xingyin turned to look at Zhong Cheng, who was standing on the side. Zhong Cheng's expression was still a little crazy at the moment, and several young and strong men had already approached him. As long as he did anything wrong, they would subdue him. Zhong Cheng looked at He Lu strangely. He felt that this person was a little familiar, but at this time, it was obvious that his thinking ability was somewhat insufficient. He stretched out his hand and pointed at He Lu, his voice full of resentment. "Who is this man? Is he your new lover? Is it because of him that you want to break up with me? I knew it, you women are all fickle." As soon as these words came out, not only did Gu Xingyin feel irritated, but the people around couldn't stand it anymore. After watching the scene for a long time, they roughly knew what had happened. This tall, rich and handsome man cheated on his girlfriend when the two were dating, and his girlfriend broke up with him angrily. As a result, after the breakup, he realized that his girlfriend was his true love, and carefully prepared a gift and a proposal to get back together. This kind of trick was not unfamiliar, and it was normal for his girlfriend to be unwilling to forgive him. After all, there was a first time for everything, and no one could say for sure who the great young Master Zhong would like next time. Originally, it was fine to part on good terms, but with Zhong Cheng's conditions, how could he worry about no beauties coming to him? This matter was originally Zhong Cheng's unsightly behavior, and later he even wanted to use violence, which was even more low class. Anyone who saw this would feel that Zhong Cheng was pestering her and was unwilling to let her go. Especially now, Zhong Cheng directly scolded her in anger, and he didn't just scold one person, but all the women. At this time, even the women who had felt pity for him when they saw his sad appearance felt that he deserved it. This was the best time to see a person's true thoughts. If this was how young Master Zhong viewed women, then what he said about his deep love for his girlfriend was most likely an exaggeration. Gu Xingyin looked at Zhong Cheng coldly. At this moment, she was sure that there was something wrong with Zhong Cheng's brain. She knew that Zhong Cheng was a smart person. Under normal circumstances, he would never say such words that would put himself in a disadvantageous position. And from Zhong Cheng's appearance, it was very obvious that he had been provoked and suddenly had a relapse. Gu Xingyin did not know what illness he had, but she knew that it was best to calm him down as soon as possible and not continue to be agitated. However, who was Zhong Cheng? Why should she, Gu Xingyin, empathize with him? If it was an innocent person, Gu Xingyin wouldn't have minded lending a helping hand. But if it was Zhong Cheng, the more he could not be provoked, the more Gu Xingyin wanted to provoke him. She glanced sideways at He Lu and suddenly said, "Please do me a favor." He Lu heard this and lowered his head to look at her. "How?" Gu Xingyin smiled. "Later, just don't expose me." Chapter 1580. He Lu didn't quite understand what she meant, but he still nodded, indicating that there was no problem. Gu Xingyin looked up and smiled at him, then looked at Zhong Cheng. She smiled very comfortably, as if she wasn't affected by Zhong Cheng's appearance at all. "You're right. This person is my new boyfriend. We have a good relationship and are going to get married soon. But I want to defend myself. I only met him after I broke up with you." Her tone was light and slow, as if she was telling a story. Speaking of which, I have to thank you for cheating. Zhong Cheng, thank you for letting me break up with you. After leaving you, I realized that there are so many good men in this world waiting for me, so that I don't have to hang myself on a crooked tree like you. Some people around couldn't help but laugh. This girl's move was beautiful. She didn't make a scene like a crazy person. Instead, she used another way to ruthlessly repay this man for cheating. I left you, so I found a better man. Thank you for cheating. There was nothing more ironic than this. Who hadn't met a few scumbags when they were young? The best way to deal with such a person was to kick him away and find a better one. It was also the best revenge for a scumbag. If you don't cherish me, someone will. Zhong Cheng's eyes turned even redder because of this sentence. His whole body trembled, as if he was trying his best to suppress something. Gu Shengyin saw him like this, took out her phone and pressed 110 without hesitation. This man looked very abnormal. He had a violent tendency to hurt people just now. Gu Shengyin said that as a good citizen, it was naturally better to leave this kind of thing to the police. When Zhong Cheng saw her actions, he suddenly lost control. He rushed directly towards Gu Shengyin and shouted, "Damn woman, I'm going to kill you." The few people beside him hurriedly stopped him, but Zhong Cheng, who was crazy, was very strong. He broke free from the restraints of the three men and approached Gu Shengyin directly. Gu Shengyin's eyes turned cold. Just as she was about to react, He Lu's voice came from the side. "Don't be afraid, I'm here." He took a step forward and stood in front of Gu Shengyin. Everyone then saw that Zhong Cheng, whom even 3 adult men couldn't stop, was directly punched to the ground by this handsome and cold man. He couldn't get up for a long time. Gu Shengyin couldn't help but smile. How could she forget that He Lu was a major general in the military? With him here, Zhong Cheng really couldn't stir up much trouble. Vaguely, she could hear the girls in the crowd whispering, "He's so handsome, if it were me, I would definitely choose such a man," and so on. When He Lu looked up, he just happened to see this extremely faint smile. His gaze could not help but soften. At this moment, the sound of sirens came from outside. A police car had arrived. What's going on? Who's calling the police here? 2 uniformed policemen waved the crowd aside and walked in. Gu Shengyin stood up. "It's me, police comrade." She pointed at Zhong Cheng, who was still rolling on the ground holding his stomach. "This person on the ground is my ex-boyfriend. I caught him cheating and broke up with him. Today, he insisted on getting back together with me. I didn't want to, so he used violence on me." The police looked at Gu Shengyin and then at Zhong Cheng, who was lying on the ground, and were a little suspicious. Chapter 1581. After all, no matter how one looked at it, Zhong Cheng didn't look like the violent one. Gu Shengyin quickly added, "Officer, you can ask the onlookers. If my boyfriend hadn't come in time, I might have been hospitalized today." The people next to her also said that she wasn't lying. They said that the man was scary when he went crazy. The policeman pointed at Zhong Cheng on the ground hesitantly. "Then what is he doing?" Gu Shengyin said, "He rushed over to hit me. My boyfriend was defending himself." The policeman was speechless. It was also okay to beat someone up in self-defense until they couldn't get up. But looking at the reaction of the people around, this lady didn't seem to be lying. He thought about it and asked another person to help Zhong Cheng back to the police station. He said to Gu Shengyin and He Lu, "I'll have to trouble the 2 of you to come with me to make a statement." Before Gu Shengyin could say anything, He Lu took out something and handed it over. "My girlfriend was quite frightened today. She doesn't want to see that person again. Can I go with you?" The policeman took the small notebook in confusion. When he looked at it, his hand trembled and he almost dropped it on the ground. This. His attitude instantly became respectful, and he politely handed the item back with both hands. "How can we trouble you? This young lady seems to have suffered quite a shock. It would be better for you to accompany her to the hospital for a checkup. When it's convenient for you to make a statement, you can make it up." The policeman didn't expect that a casual relationship dispute would involve such a big shot. If he really took the man in for a statement, the chief would probably let him go tomorrow. He Lu wasn't surprised by this result. He put away the notebook and nodded. "Okay, I'll make it up another day." Now, take her to the hospital first. The policeman watched them leave with a very friendly attitude. The onlookers had been watching a good show. In the end, the policeman's attitude added a layer of mystery to this big show. This lady's boyfriend was not only handsome and good at fighting, but the key was that he seemed to have a strong background. He, Lu and Gu Shengyin walked for a while until they were far away from that place. No one followed them. Gu Shengyin exhaled and pressed her forehead. She raised her head and smiled at the man who was a head taller than her. "Thank you so much for today." He, Lu, shook his head. "It's nothing." Gu Shengyin thought for a moment and said, "You've helped me so much, but I still don't know your name." She took the lead and stretched out her hand. "My surname is Chong Yuji." The heaviness of overlapping, the rain of clouds dissipating and rain clearing. He, Lu, looked at the fair palm in front of him and slowly placed his hand on it. He gently held the hand that was very slender compared to his own. "I'm He Lu," he as in celebration, Lu as in higher level. When he let go, He Lu subconsciously twisted his fingers, and a trace of reluctance flashed through his heart. Gu Shengyin looked at the time. She had been delayed for so long. She suggested, "It's getting late. As a thank you, I'll treat you to dinner." He, Lu, was surprised. "Don't you need to go home for dinner?" Gu Shengyin shook her head and asked, "Do you have an appointment?" He, Lu, shook his head. Gu Shengyin laughed. "That's good. I know a very good seafood restaurant. Let's go." He, Lu, followed her silently and took out his mobile phone to send a message to He, Lu, "I have something to do tonight. I won't go home for dinner. Don't wait." Chapter 1582. He Chi, who had just returned home from work, saw the text message and scolded with a smile. This kid specially asked his sister-in-law to cook his favorite dishes, and now he's telling me that he's not going home to eat? He, Lu, didn't care what his second brother was thinking. The place Gu Shengyin recommended was very good, and the two of them ate happily. After dinner, He, Lu, sent Gu Shengyin back. There was soothing music playing in the car. Coupled with the fact that they had just finished eating, Gu Shengyin felt drowsy. He, Lu, suddenly asked, "When are we going to get the marriage certificate?" Gu Shengyin was startled awake by this sentence. She quickly sat up straight and looked at He, Lu. "What did you just say?" He, Lu, saw Gu Shengyin's expression in the rearview mirror. Her eyes were wide open, and her mouth was slightly open in surprise, revealing a hidden bright red tip of her tongue. She looked like a frightened rabbit. It was inexplicably delicious. He repeated his words calmly. "I said, when are we going to get the marriage certificate?" Gu Shengyin was still a little dazed. Obviously, she couldn't keep up with his rhythm. He, Lu, kindly reminded her. "You said this afternoon that we were about to get married." "Gu Sheng," she said with some difficulty, "that? Didn't you say it to anger Zhongqing?" He, Lu, "So?" Gu Shengyin smiled. "So, you can't take it seriously, right?" The car suddenly braked and stopped. He, Lu, turned his head and looked at Gu Shengyin intently. Gu Shengyin was a little scared by such a gaze. He, Lu, looked at her nervous appearance and felt funny in his heart. Did he look so scary? But on the surface, he still looked expressionless. "Do you know who I am?" Gu Shengyin nodded. The daughter of the Zhong family wasn't an idiot. Coupled with the police's reaction earlier, there was a problem if she said that she didn't know. He, Lu, was very satisfied with this answer. He continued, "Since you know who I am, then you must have some understanding of my character. You should also know that I, He, Lu, have never said anything false." Gu Shengyin almost instantly understood what he meant. So what he meant was that even if the two of them were pretending at the beginning, since both of them said such words, the fake had to become true. Gu Shengyin blinked and blinked again, trying his best to calm himself down. "But it was no use," she said carefully. "But for things like marriage, it's better for both of us. There is no emotional foundation." Although she was happy to do so, she still had to say what she needed to say because of Chong Yuji's identity. He, Lu, frowned. "Who said there is no emotional foundation?" "Gu Shengyin?" He, Lu, unfastened his seatbelt with one hand and turned to look at Gu Shengyin. "You don't think that I'm the kind of person who will be kind enough to save a random person I see on the road, do you?" Gu Shengyin. So I have feelings for you," He, Lu, said. As for you, he looked at Gu Shengyin and suddenly bent down. The space in the car was small. When he was so close, Gu Shengyin only felt that her whole breath was filled with He Lu's smell. That light and distant lotus smell was a smell that belonged only to her. Chapter 1583. She couldn't help blushing. Gu Shengyin didn't need to look to know that she must be blushing at this moment. He Lu was very satisfied with her reaction. He said, "Look, you blushed when you were in contact with me like this. You were nervous. It means that you still have feelings for me." Gu Shengyin, did that count? She forced herself to say, no matter who it is, it's impossible for him not to have feelings for me. After she finished speaking, she felt that the charming atmosphere around her suddenly became cold. Although He Lu's expression didn't change at all, Gu Shengyin knew that this man was unhappy. He Lu didn't step back. On the contrary, he moved closer again, and they could smell each other's breath. He Lu's low voice sounded in the car. "Do you feel disgusted that I'm so close to you first?" Gu Shengyin didn't say anything, but her face turned redder. This reaction obviously pleased He Lu. He moved closer again. This time, he touched Gu Shengyin's lips firmly. His lips and tongue didn't go deep. Instead, he gently sucked Gu Shengyin's lower lip. There was no extra movement, but there was a hint of affection lingering around the two of them. He Lu looked at Gu Shengyin like this. He let go of her lips. "Do you feel disgusted that I'm like this?" Gu Shengyin closed her eyes. She already knew what He Lu meant. He was forcing her to admit that he was different to her. Her body and her reaction couldn't lie. She didn't feel disgusted by his touch. She knew his purpose, but she couldn't do anything about it. This man, even if he used an overt scheme that you could see through, could still make you speechless. He Lu suddenly laughed out loud. "If another man treated you like this, would you do the same?" Gu Shengyin suddenly opened her eyes. She looked at the man who was close to her and sighed in her heart. She took the initiative to put her hand around his neck and put her lips on his. At this point, there was no point in being pretentious. He Lu was surprised by her initiative, but he quickly reacted. He bent down and kissed her fiercely. After a long time, the two of them finally separated. He Lu's voice sounded a little breathless. He leaned against Gu Shengyin's forehead and whispered, "Tomorrow, I will visit your house." Gu Shengyin shook her head. He Lu was puzzled. But Gu Shengyin said, "My father is the only one in the Chong family." "My father," she didn't finish her sentence, but He Lu understood what she meant. His brother had mentioned the things that Zhongming had done at home. He held Gu Shengyin's hand and said, "It's okay, Yuji. I'm with you because I'm with you. It has nothing to do with your father." He didn't have much time off, so he wanted to settle this matter before he returned to the army. He knew it was rushed, but he didn't want to wait. He Lu was like this. It was difficult for him to take a person to heart, but if he really did, he wouldn't hesitate at all and wouldn't allow anyone to treat her badly. "Don't worry. I'll do everything well." Gu Shengyin's eyes flashed. She met the man's determined gaze and didn't object in the end. He Lu was in a good mood as he sent Gu Shengyin home. Then he called home on the way back. He had found his future wife. Hurry up and prepare the gift and wedding. The He family was in chaos. Chapter 1584. When He Lu returned home, He Chi had already received the news. He and his wife sat in the living room with serious expressions on their faces as they waited for He Lu to come back. He Lu wasn't surprised at all that they had such a reaction. He walked to the other side of the sofa and sat down. Then he said, "What do you want to ask?" He Chi and his wife's eyes lit up and they were about to speak. Then they heard He Lu say slowly, "Don't ask first. I'll tell you when we get home tomorrow." He Chi and his wife. This feeling of knowing that there was a secret right in front of them but being able to pry it out was really uncomfortable. But no matter how unhappy they were, they could only hold it in. If He Lu wasn't willing to say it, no one would know. So the next morning He Chi and his wife got up early. After they packed everything, they returned to the He family mansion with He Lu. When the three of them arrived home, they found that the house was already full of people. Even their brother, who had always been very busy, had gone home. Seeing that his brother was looking at him, He Ji calmly adjusted his glasses and said calmly, "Today is the weekend." He-chi. Ha, don't think that I know that you've never had a weekend. To be honest, every time he saw He-ji's busy appearance, He-chi was especially glad that he chose the path of business. Now that his business was on the right track, he had extra time to travel around the world with his wife and daughter. He-lu faced the burning gazes of the whole family alone. However, he didn't feel nervous at all. Instead, he felt that it was very good. Most of the important people in the He family were here. If there were any questions, he could explain it all at once. There was no need for someone to suddenly appear and ask him all sorts of questions. The He family members looked around. In the end, old master He coughed lightly and said, "He-lu, you called back yesterday to say that you found your future daughter-in-law?" He-lu nodded with a serious expression. "Yes, grandfather. I've confirmed my relationship with her and am preparing to marry her." This old master He's heart skipped a beat. He asked, "Which family is she from?" He-lu said, "Lu Qingshan's granddaughter, Zhong Minggang's daughter." Old master He didn't know much about the business world, so he turned to He-chi. He-chi roughly explained the background of the Lu family and the Zhong family. Old master He nodded. Her family background can be considered clean. In other words, he was not dissatisfied with Gu Xingyin's identity. In reality, even if he wasn't satisfied, He-lu wouldn't listen to him. Old master He also asked, "Why haven't I heard you mention this before?" Logically speaking, they were already talking about marriage. With He-lu's personality, he shouldn't be so secretive. Hearing this, He-chi wanted to cover his face and laugh. As far as he knew, his younger brother had only gotten to know him after he returned home from his long vacation. How could there have been any rumors about him before? He-lu didn't hide anything. "I haven't known her for long. We just confirmed our relationship yesterday." Old master He, yesterday they confirmed their relationship, and today they were talking about marriage? Even though old master He knew that his grandson was very efficient, this was a little too fast. He-lu's parents weren't as conflicted as old master He. In their eyes, it was a good thing that their son was willing to get married. Old master He had many grandchildren, but they only had one son. They were still waiting for their grandchildren. Chapter 1585. He-lu could also see old master He's dilemma. He directly expressed his position. "Grandfather, I like her and want to marry her. No woman has ever made me feel this way." What he meant was that it was love at first sight and he didn't want to marry anyone else. Old master He looked at the grandson who resembled him the most. He sighed in his heart and said, "Find a time to bring her back for a look. Marriage is such a big thing. You have to let the elders take a look." He-lu nodded. "Okay, I'll take care of this before I return to the army." When he came out of the He family's old residence, He-lu was pulled aside by his impatient parents. He-lu's mother was in the arts and had been spoiled by He-lu's father her whole life. She was already in her 40s, but her personality was still very romantic. "Xiao-lu, is the girl you like pretty?" she asked her son. Father He was helpless. Other people's elders would ask about their character and family background. Her mother-in-law, on the other hand, only cared about these things. He-lu answered her seriously, "She's very pretty, Mom." Mother He smiled happily when she heard that. She loved beautiful things the most and naturally hoped that her son could find a pleasing daughter-in-law. If an ordinary person heard this madam's requirements for choosing a daughter-in-law, they would probably be speechless. The next morning, He-lu brought gifts to the Zhong family's house. Chong Ming heard from his daughter that her boyfriend would be coming the next day. When he heard that it wasn't Zhong Cheng, Father Chong threw a tantrum. But Gu Xingyin wasn't afraid of him. In the end, Chong Minggang still chose to stay at home. No matter what, if he wanted to be the Zhong family's son-in-law, he had to be decent. He was afraid that his daughter's taste wasn't good and she found someone with a bad family background and character. Wouldn't it be embarrassing if word got out? But the next day, when he saw He-lu in a trench coat and carrying a gift box, Father Chong thought he was hallucinating. He had seen He-lu before. At a charity dinner hosted by He-chi, He-lu happened to be free at that time, so he was dragged by his brother to support the event. Chong Minggang found some connections and squeezed his way out. He threw a few million yuan and stood far away, watching the He family surrounded by countless important people. At that time, He Lu was like this, standing expressionlessly beside He Chi. He saw her, but it was obvious that she didn't notice him at all. But now, this man, who was said to have become a major general at a young age, was actually her daughter's boyfriend? Chongming just felt like he was still asleep. But He Lu's cold face and his daughter's normal expression told him that this was not a dream. Her daughter had found a major general as her boyfriend, and he was from the He family. After a brief moment of surprise, they were overjoyed. If his daughter managed to get close to the He family, then he would be the He family's in-law. At that time, who wouldn't give him some face in the business world? Chongminggang's face was full of joy the entire morning. When the few of them were chatting, he never stopped praising them. He even asked about He Lu and Gu Xingyin's future plans. He couldn't wait to pack up Gu Xingyin and send her to him. Gu Xingyin felt embarrassed as she listened. They had lunch at the Chong family's house. After lunch, He Lu said goodbye. Gu Xingyin also used the excuse of seeing him off and walked out with him. Chapter 1586. Thank you for your hard work. He Lu suddenly reached out and held Gu Xingyin's hand. He only came over today to chat with Chongminggang for a while, but he could see that Chongminggang didn't have much sincerity for this daughter. It was obvious that he was most concerned about his career. He felt sorry for Gu Xingyin for such a father. Gu Xingyin shook her head. Actually, he wasn't harsh on me. If you could have known me earlier, you could have met my mother. Thinking of Lu Qinghe, that gentle and beautiful woman appeared in her memory. My mother gave me all her love. If she met you, she would definitely like you very much. He Lu held her hand tightly. If I treat you well in the future, Auntie's soul in heaven will be happy to see it. Gu Xingyin smiled and nodded. In the afternoon, they went to the Lu family. This was requested by He Lu himself. After he returned home yesterday, He Chi went to find him and told him some things he found out. Obviously, the Lu family was more like her family than Chongminggang. And in Gu Xingyin's heart, the Lu family was probably closer than the Chong family. So if she wanted to meet the parents, He Lu was willing to accompany Gu Xingyin to the Lu family. Gu Xingyin was stunned for a moment after hearing his plan. Then he slowly smiled. Thank you, He Lu. He Lu just held her hand tightly and didn't say anything. Without a doubt, He Lu's arrival shocked the entire Lu family. Because it wasn't announced in advance, only Old Master Lu, Lu Qingshan, and Gu Xingyin's eldest aunt were at home. Then, Gu Xingyin brought He Lu into the house in broad daylight. Old Master Lu was drinking tea at that time. When he saw the man who Gu Xingyin called Old Master Lu behind, he almost choked. He forced himself to calm down, and then tried to ask what happened as calmly as possible. Gu Xingyin told He Lu about how he and He Lu met in a few sentences. He Lu listened quietly at the side. During this time, Elder Lu's gaze never left the two of them. Although He Lu's expression was cold, his eyes were always on his granddaughter. When he saw that He Lu had personally poured tea for her, he lowered his gaze and sighed in his heart. If I'm not mistaken, General He and our Yuji have only known each other for less than a week, right? Elder Lu still remembered the scene when Gu Xingyin asked who that man was. He Lu's gaze was very sincere. I feel that time does not represent everything. I only know that when I first saw Yuji, there was a voice in my heart telling me that it was her. His gaze met Elder Lu's weathered eyes, and he did not back down at all. I can be sure that in this life, there will never be another woman who can give me such a feeling. I will definitely not let Yuji down. Such words were not enough to move Elder Lu's expression. Empty words have no proof. Our Lu family cannot be compared to the He family. What if Yuji is wronged in the future? He Lu was not angry at all in the face of such doubts. In his opinion, it was normal for the Lu family to be so concerned about Gu Xingyin. Chongminggang looked like he couldn't wait to sell a product. There was no hesitation in his tone. With me, He Lu, around, I will not let Yuji be wronged in the slightest. But Elder Lu looked at him. I heard that General He's words are worth 1,000 gold, and you never lie. I hope you can really do it. Chapter 1587. At first, the atmosphere between Elder Lu and He Lu was still a little tense. Gu Shengyin was worried that the two of them would argue. She didn't expect that the more they talked, the more they got along, and the more the smile on her grandfather's face became. When he heard He Lu say that he knew how to play chess, Elder Lu's eyes lit up. "General He, are you willing to play a few rounds with me?" He Lu said, "Elder Lu, just call me He Lu, otherwise, Xiao He and Xiao Lu are fine too." When he said this, it meant that he really treated Elder Lu as an elder. One had to know that he didn't say such things in front of Chongming Gang. Elder Lu laughed. "Then I'll be thick-skinned and call you Xiao He. If you don't mind, you can call me Grandpa Lu." After all, the relationship between the two of them hadn't been officially established yet, and they didn't know what the He family's attitude was. Elder Lu couldn't let people call him Grandpa directly. He Lu nodded slightly and called, "Grandpa Lu." Elder Lu was in a good mood when he heard this. He invited He Lu into the study to play chess. He turned around and called Gu Shengyin's first aunt, saying that Yuji had brought her boyfriend over. He asked second brother and third brother to bring their wives over to meet him. When the two of them entered the study, first aunt gave Gu Shengyin a thumbs up. Gu Shengyin lowered her head slightly and smiled as if she was embarrassed. When it was almost dinner time, the Lu family came over one after another. When they heard that Gu Shengyin's boyfriend was playing chess with Elder Lu in the study, they were all surprised. One had to know that Elder Lu's study was very precious. If it wasn't someone who had really gained his approval, he wouldn't let them in easily. "It seems that Yuji's boyfriend has really caught father's eye," second aunt said with a smile. They still didn't know He Lu's identity. When He Lu accompanied Elder Lu downstairs, the three brothers of the Lu family were all stunned. Fortunately, the three of them weren't inexperienced. Although they were surprised, they maintained their poise and greeted He Lu with a smile. It was a sumptuous dinner, and they had a good time. When Gu Shengyin sent He Lu home, he held Gu Shengyin's hand. "Your family is very good." Gu Shengyin couldn't help but nod when she thought of the Lu family who treated her like a treasure. He Lu thought for a moment and said, "I'll pick you up tomorrow." Gu Shengyin was puzzled. "What are you doing?" He Lu's face was calm. "Meet my parents and grandfather." Gu Shengyin, "Is it really okay for you to talk about such an important matter in such a casual tone? Why are you in such a hurry?" she asked. He Lu nodded. "It's rare for me to have a long holiday. I'll be returning to the army in 5 days. Before I go back, I want to settle things with you." He was always greedy and wanted to settle down early. In this way, everyone would know that this girl belonged to He Lu and no one would dare to have any ideas about her. Those who wanted to bully her would think twice before making a move to see if they could withstand He Lu's wrath. Gu Shengyin raised her head and looked at He Lu. The wind at night was a little strong, but he stood there like a barrier that would never fall. He blocked all the wind and noise outside and couldn't touch her at all. She nodded. "Okay." Chapter 1588. After Gu Shengyin sent He Lu off and returned to the Lu family, she was immediately interrogated by her curious uncles and aunts. She sighed and simply explained how she and He Lu met, knew each other, and then got together. Of course, the part in the car was too embarrassing, so she glossed over it a little. "That's it?" Third aunt was a little surprised. Gu Shengyin nodded innocently. Second aunt, who had a fiery temper, was also in disbelief. "So, the two of you have only known each other for less than 2 weeks and you're already talking about marriage?" Gu Shengyin nodded again. Everyone in the Lu family was speechless. It was simply the most standard of a flash marriage. But when they saw how Gu Shengyin and He Lu interacted with each other, they felt that there was a tacit understanding between them. They didn't seem like a young couple who had just confirmed their relationship. Maybe it's really fate? First aunt concluded. Gu Shengyin stayed at the Lu family's house that night. Chongming had just called to ask, but Gu Shengyin casually found an excuse to dismiss him. When they found out that Gu Shengyin was going to the He family's house tomorrow, the aunts were very concerned about this matter. Actually, if the other party was from an ordinary family, they wouldn't be so worried. It was because the He family's status was too high that they were nervous for Gu Shengyin. They were afraid that she wouldn't do well and would be looked down upon. Actually, Gu Xingyin wasn't that nervous. She was probably the calmest one out of them all. After all, she had experienced all sorts of things. It wasn't easy for her to be nervous again. She had even met so many gods. Really, meeting her boyfriend's parents wasn't a big deal. The next day, when Lu came to pick her up, he specially told her not to be nervous. Gu Xingyin smiled and said that she really wasn't nervous. Just as she had expected, the He family was a century-old family. They actually had a good upbringing and wouldn't make things difficult for a junior. She felt quite relaxed. After she left, Old Master He and Lu's parents thought highly of her. Old Master He, calm in the face of change, dignified and generous. She's a good match. This was a normal evaluation from an elder. Lu's father, she's a good girl. Her family background, personality, and style of conversation are all outstanding. This was an affirmation from her boyfriend's father. Lu's mother, I like this daughter-in-law. She's very pretty. This was the highest compliment a granny could give her. In short, there were no problems. Both parties had a good relationship, and their families were satisfied. To Lu, it meant that they could get their marriage certificate. He and Gu Xingyin had agreed that the wedding would be held after his next wedding leave, but they could get the marriage certificate first. Gu Xingyin was helpless against the man's persistence. However, she still agreed to his request very indulgently. When they came out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, Gu Xingyin was a little surprised. This was the first time she had gotten a marriage certificate without even going through a proposal. Now that he thought about it, it was a little novel. The two of them did not tell anyone about the marriage certificate. This was also what Lu said. He was afraid that people would look down on Gu Xingyin because of this, because there was no wedding. Wait for me to go to the military and submit the application immediately. Yuji. He lowered his head and kissed her forehead gently. When I come back, I'll hold a grand wedding for you and let everyone know that you're my wife. Chapter 1589. After the two registered their marriage, Lu accompanied Gu Xingyin to the mall. He didn't usually come to places like this, but he knew that girls usually liked places like this. Gu Xingyin wasn't very passionate about this, but she saw Lu's intentions and didn't reject him. Coincidentally, she saw a familiar face in the mall. And when? She was still dressed in branded clothes and was holding a friend's arm. The two of them were carrying a few big shopping bags and were chatting with smiles on their faces. Gu Xin even heard the girl beside Anwen say enviously, "Anwen, you're so rich now. The daughters of rich families are indeed different. Any piece of clothing here is worth 2 months of my salary." Gu Xingyin stopped in her tracks and stood there with a faint smile. Anwen listened to the compliments of the girl beside her proudly. She liked this feeling. Then she raised her head and saw Gu Xingyin looking at her. Anwen's heart skipped a beat. The girl beside her was still chattering. Anwen felt embarrassed and quickly patted her hand. "Stop talking." The girl was still a little confused. Following Anwen's gaze, she saw Gu Xingyin and Lu not far in front of them. With just one glance, her eyes revealed a look of amazement. This pair of man and woman, if placed in a crowd, would definitely be a very eye-catching existence. If the two of them stood together, they would be even more eye-catching. There were even passers-by who secretly looked around, suspecting that it was just two celebrities taking photos on the street. Who is this? The girl secretly tugged at the corner of Anwen's shirt. Anwen looked at Gu Xingyin a little unnaturally. The eldest daughter of the Chong family. The girl's eyes lit up. The eldest daughter of the Chong family, then isn't that your? Anwen's hand pinched her arm hard and the girl instantly stopped talking. Anwen was actually quite embarrassed. She had pretended to be the daughter of a wealthy family and flaunted her wealth in front of her friends, but in the end she was caught red-handed by someone who knew the truth. What Anwen was most afraid of was being found out by Gu Xingyin. After all, she knew very well that she had no status in front of Gu Xingyin. She was afraid that Gu Xingyin would expose her on the spot. If that happened, she would really be embarrassed. In the end, Gu Xingyin's eyes slowly fell on her and then swept down. She looked at the pile of luxury brands and did not say anything. She turned her head to Lu and said, "Let's go." Lu didn't know who Anwen was, But he could see that Gu Xingyin didn't like her. Hearing Gu Xingyin's words, he nodded and left with Gu Xingyin. From the beginning to the end, Gu Xingyin had no intention of talking to Enwen. Enwen stood where she was and watched the two of them walk past as if they didn't exist. Her friend whispered, "Isn't the eldest daughter of the Chong family your sister? Why is she ignoring us?" Enwen forced a smile and said, "She has always been arrogant and has never treated me as a sister." Her friend said, "Oh," to show that she understood. Immediately, her attention turned to another matter. "Is the man beside your sister her boyfriend? He's so handsome." Enwen was a little absent-minded. "Maybe." On the other side, He-Lu looked at Gu Xingyin and asked, "That girl just now, is she someone you know?" Chapter 1590. Although this was a family scandal, Gu Xingyin felt that there was nothing that couldn't be said. She briefly told He-Lu about Ensure and her daughter. "That girl just now was the cheap sister that lived in my house for a while." He-Lu's face darkened. The matter between Zhongming Gang and Madame In and her daughter was not a secret in the capital's circle. Many people secretly laughed at Zhongming Gang for being devoted his whole life. In the end, when his wife died, he showed his true colors. He-Lu of course didn't know about this, but He-Chi did. Especially after knowing that the eldest daughter of the Zhong family might become his future sister-in-law, he told He-Lu everything he knew about the Zhong family. If it was someone unrelated to him, He-Lu naturally wouldn't spend any effort on it. But when the pitiful daughter in the story became the person he cherished, He-Lu said in a low voice, "So after that woman was kicked out of the Zhong family, she still flaunted her identity as the daughter of the Zhong family. Why didn't you expose her?" Gu Xingyin shook her head. "In a place like the business center, there are too many familiar people. If I quarreled with her, no matter what the result was, it would be a loss of face for the Zhong family." She said, "The Yin family's mother and daughter were kicked out of the Zhong family, but I saw today that Enwen is clearly living the life of a young lady. People like them don't need others to do anything, they can just kill themselves." Gu Xingyin wasn't wrong at all. And Yen and Enwen were kicked out of the Zhong family by the furious Chongming Gang. Other than the clothes on their body and their own documents, they didn't take anything out. And in the past few years, they didn't save a single cent of the money that Chongming Gang gave them. Under these circumstances, the only asset left of the Yin family's mother and daughter was the apartment that they bought in the early years. In the capital, an apartment was worth a lot of money. And Yen had been raised by Chongming Gang all these years, and had long become a rich lady who only knew how to drink tea, play, and shop. Asking her to go out and work to earn money? Obviously, it wasn't realistic. And Enwen? Although she had the title of a graduate from a famous university, she didn't have any experience. She went to many companies to interview, but the salary that was offered couldn't meet her requirements. It was still the same sentence. Chongming had just raised her heart. Relying on ordinary work alone couldn't sustain her demand for famous brands. Moreover, Enwen herself didn't care about that little bit of salary that couldn't even afford to buy a handbag if she worked herself to death. So the Yin mother and daughter thought about it and sold their house in the capital. The house was sold for a large sum of money. If they had a good life, it would be enough for them to buy a house in a small city and live a carefree life. But obviously, the Yin family's mother and daughter weren't people who were willing to live a mediocre life. Today's Enwen's. She loosened her grip and instantly returned to the style of a rich young lady. Gu Xingyin took a quick glance at the clothes she was wearing today. The total cost of the entire outfit was more than 6 digits. Gu Xingyin didn't need to dirty his hands to deal with people like this. By the time they spent all their money based on their style, it would be the end of the road for them. Chapter 1591. After accompanying Gu Xingyin for a few days, He-Lu returned to the army. Gu Xingyin returned home. Ever since he found out that his daughter had a boyfriend like He-Lu, Chongming Gang's attitude towards Gu Xingyin had completely changed. When they chatted, He-Lu was always the topic of conversation. The meaning behind her words was to persuade her daughter to quickly hook up with He-Lu, this rare golden turtle husband. To be honest, every time Gu Xingyin heard such words, he would feel uncomfortable and flustered. The only thing Chong Ming-gang cared about was whether he could become in-laws with the He family. If that was the case, how much could he benefit from this marriage? He didn't even care if He Lu treated his daughter well. Fortunately, these days didn't last long. Gu Xingyin's uncle sent news. He said that everything was ready. Gu Xingyin knew very well what this meant. On Tuesday, the Chong Group held a shareholders' meeting. This meeting was initiated by Chong Ming-gang. It was about a major project that the Chong Group was about to start and needed the support of a majority of shareholders. In fact, such a meeting would usually be approved. After all, Chong Ming-gang was injured 25% of the shares, while Gu Xingyin had 30%. Just the father and daughter alone held more than half of the shares in the Chong Group. As long as his daughter was on his side, Chong Ming-gang could be said to be in an invincible position. Chong Ming-gang was very confident. After his wife died, he became his daughter's only family. Even if there were some disagreements in the past, how could there be overnight hatred between father and daughter? He never thought that there would be a time when his daughter would be at odds with him. Gu Xingyin was dressed very formally today. The pure black business suit made her look capable and experienced. Her hair, which was usually scattered behind her head, was neatly tied up. She looked like a strong woman who had been in the workplace for a long time. Because she was the largest shareholder, even if she was very young, her position was very high. This project was approved without a doubt. Chong Ming-gang smiled complacently. Just as he was about to announce the end of the meeting, Gu Xingyin suddenly stood up. "There's one more thing I need to discuss with you all." Chong Ming-gang frowned. Yuji. Usually, this daughter of his would just sit there quietly without any sense of presence. What was she trying to do? Gu Xingyin looked around the room with a smile and said, "As a major shareholder of the Zhong Group, I think that Mr. Zhong Ming-gang is too old to be the head of the Zhong Group. Now, I propose that Mr. Zhong Ming-gang be dismissed from his position in the Zhong Group. I, Zhong Yuji, will take over his position." A single stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. The hundreds of shareholders below were discussing animatedly. However, if someone observed carefully at this moment, he would find that many major shareholders who held a lot of shares of Chong's group were very calm when they heard the news, as if they had already known what would happen. As for Chong Ming-gang, his face had already turned ashen when Gu Xingyin said her first sentence. By the time Gu Xingyin finished speaking, his face had completely darkened. "Zhong Yuji, what do you mean?" he questioned. Gu Xingyin looked back at him without dodging. "Father, you're old." Chapter 1592. Chong Ming-gang only felt a surge of anger in his heart. He had guarded against the Lu family, but he didn't expect that his daughter would do such a thing. He turned around and said coldly, "I don't agree." He raised his voice and said, "Although Yuji is my child and the largest shareholder of the Chong Group, she has never learned anything about the business world and has no experience in handling company affairs. Taking over the company rashly like this won't do any good to the development of the Chong Group." Gu Xingyin had long known that Chong Ming-gang would not wait for death. However, since she dared to say such words, she must have been fully prepared. "Let's vote, father." Gu Xingyin said calmly, "If more than half of the shareholders support me, father, you should give up your power." Chong Ming-gang looked at the shareholders who were discussing below. Even though he knew that Gu Xingyin must be prepared, if he agreed to her, he would obviously be in a passive position, but he couldn't say anything. He looked at the results of the vote with a cold face. It was expected. Chong Ming-gang looked at his old partners who had worked with him for many years. One by one, they voted for his daughter, and his vision turned black. He didn't know if he should be angry, or because he despised the so-called friendship in the business world. Gu Xingyin didn't have a smug smile on her face. Instead, she said to Chong Ming-gang in a low voice, "Father, you can retire in peace. I will let you spend your old age in peace." Chong Ming-gang's mind was very dizzy, but he forced himself not to show anything. He sneered and said, "Then I'll see what you can do." He wasn't in a hurry at the moment. As long as his daughter really got the hang of it, she would find that managing a large listed company wasn't as simple as managing a small private studio. When the time came, she would beg him to go back. When the results were out, Chong Ming-gang snorted coldly. He didn't even say anything. He snorted coldly and left with a flick of his sleeves. The next day, the news was announced in the newspapers, financial news, and even social media. The Chong group has changed. The young chairman has become the new leader. When Enwen saw the news, she was having a facial massage with her friend at the beauty salon. The girl looked at the news on her phone and said in surprise, "Wenwen, your sister has become the president of Chong's group." Enwen's face stiffened. She had always told her friends that her mother had married Zhong Minggang and she had become the young miss of the Zhong family. Nominally, she was Chong Yuji's sister. If she hadn't been chased out of the Zhong family, she would be flattering herself at most. However, the fact that she was chased out of the Chong family was too embarrassing. Therefore, Enwen never told her friends about it. They thought that Enwen had been living in the Zhong family all this time and was still the daughter of the Zhong family. Only Enwen herself knew how guilty she felt every time she said those words. Seeing that Enwen didn't say anything, her friend looked at her strangely. Enwen could only say, "Ah, is that so?" The girl asked suspiciously, "Wenwen, don't tell me you only know about this now?" Enwen smiled awkwardly and didn't say anything. She really just found out about it. Chapter 1593. Enwen's reaction made her friend a little suspicious. Enwen suddenly became rich. In the past, she looked like an ordinary person who didn't have to worry about food and clothing. But 2 months ago, she suddenly started to wear branded clothes and spend extravagantly. Of course, she was very envious. After asking, Enwen proudly said that her mother had married a rich man and become a rich lady. As for herself, she had transformed into a pampered young lady of a wealthy family. When she saw Enwen's appearance, she also had doubts. But Enwen looked proud and even said that she would invite her to the Zhong family's villa to play if there was a chance, so her doubts were dispelled. But now, she started to have doubts again. If Enwen really became a rich lady of the Zhong family, how could she not know about such a big thing happening at home? How could she leisurely follow her out for a massage? Enwen's friend said tentatively, "Wenwen, you said before that you would take me to the Zhong family's villa to play when you have time. Then when do you think you'll be free? I've never been to the villa before." After she asked this question, her gaze was fixed on Enwen's face. Sure enough, after hearing her words, Enwen's face flashed with a trace of unnaturalness. She stammered and said, "This? Let's talk about it another day. Right now, the family is very busy and I don't have time to entertain you." "You don't have time to entertain me, but you have time to take me shopping every day?" The girl sneered in her heart. She and Enwen were just ordinary friends. After Enwen suddenly became rich, she found a few opportunities to get close to her and slowly became good friends with her. She originally wanted to get close to Enwen because she saw that Enwen had become rich and wanted to use her to get to know a few rich young masters. But now, it seemed that things weren't as simple as Enwen said. At least, her identity as a rich lady was very problematic. The girl didn't say anything and continued to talk to Enwen with a smile. But when Enwen invited her to have dinner together, she smiled and refused. Seeing Enwen take a taxi and leave, the girl was even more certain of her guess in her heart. If she really became a rich lady, would she not even have a car? The girl called another friend of hers. Since she wanted to hook up with a rich second generation, she would naturally know a few like-minded friends. Among them, there would even be some who had already succeeded. The person she was asking was one of her sisters who had successfully become the temporary girlfriend of a rich second-generation heir. Hearing her asking about the Chong family, the other party was obviously surprised. "Why are you asking about the Chong family?" The woman still casually found a reason. "I saw the news today and it seems that he's quite rich. I want to know more." The young lady seemed to have misunderstood her meaning, thinking that she had set her sights on the Zhong family, so she smiled and said, "You'd better not have any ideas about the Zhong family. Madame Zhong just passed away a few months ago. The position of the legal wife is still there, but the Chong group is now in the hands of the eldest daughter of the Chong family. It's not a good choice." And Wen's friend pretended to be confused and asked, "The eldest daughter of the Zhong family is in charge? Didn't the Chong family have any sons? Only one daughter?" "Yes, Mrs. Chong only gave birth to a daughter and no son. Speaking of which, there was a joke in the Chong family some time ago. And Wen's friend hurriedly asked, "What joke?" The person on the other end said, "It seems that not long after Madam Chong passed away, Chairman Chong brought a mother and daughter back. He said that he met his true love, but who doesn't know that they are probably his mistresses?" Chapter 1594. And Wen perked up when she heard this. Because when she heard this, she could connect the dots with Wen's sudden wealth. Could it be that Wen was telling the truth? She was suddenly glad that she didn't confront Wen rashly today. Otherwise, she might have offended her. The other side continued. They brought her back to the Zhong family's mansion. It seems like they really love her. That daughter seems to be about the same age as the eldest daughter of the Zhong family. I heard that they dote on her a lot. The eldest daughter of the Zhong family was so angry that she made a scene at home many times. She was so angry that she even went to her grandfather's house. You know the Liu family, right? They are a first-class wealthy family. And Wen's friend listened patiently. She didn't have the heart to listen to the Liu and Li families. She only cared about the mother and daughter. Hearing that the sisters seemed to be running further and further away, she had no choice but to pull the topic back. So, the mother and daughter successfully moved into the Zhong family? Aren't they too lucky? As soon as she finished speaking, she heard the sisters sneer. Successfully moved in? Dream on. Do you really think it's so easy to move into a wealthy family? Moreover, she's old and has a child. The mother and daughter were in the limelight for less than 2 months, right? They were kicked out by the Zhong family. I heard that they didn't take anything with them when they left. And Wen's friend didn't listen to the rest of the words. Right now, she was only thinking that Wen was really lying to her. She was clearly kicked out of the Zhong family, but she was still pretending to be a rich young lady and lying to her? She told the sisters that she had something urgent to attend to. After hanging up, she called Wen. Not long after Wen arrived home, Yen went out to play cards. She ordered a Western meal alone and waited for it to be delivered. "Hello Lily, what's the matter?" Wen asked. The other side sneered. "Wen, I really misjudged you. You were kicked out of the Zhong family a long time ago. Why are you still pretending to be a rich young lady in front of me?" Wen's heart skipped a beat. How did she know? Before she could react, the other side had already started scolding her. "I say, why are you always so hesitant when talking about the Zhong family? If you don't have money, then don't have money. Why are you pretending? No matter how beautiful a pheasant is, she can't become a phoenix. You still have the nerve to say that you want to take me to the Zhong family. Aren't you afraid that the wind sprains your tongue? I really misjudged you. You were kicked out shamelessly?" Wen couldn't help but hang up the phone. She threw the phone she had just bought onto the floor and sat on the sofa in a daze for a long time. Then, she hugged the pillow and began to cry. Half of it was because he felt embarrassed, and the other half felt that he was unlucky. It would be great if she was the real young Mississippi. Then, she would be able to live the life of an upper-class person with a clear conscience, and not rely on deceiving others and puffing herself up at her own cost. She missed the days when she was in the Zhong family. Every day, she had an endless amount of money to spend and an endless supply of branded goods. As she thought about it, she began to resent her mother again. Since she had already climbed up a big tree like Zhongminggang, why did she have to find another man because she couldn't bear the loneliness? It was one thing for her to be unable to bear the loneliness, but she had carelessly left behind a seed. If she had been a little more careful, or a little more loyal, would she be Zhongminggang's biological daughter? Zhongminggang's biological daughter. Thinking of Chong Yuji's arrogant look, she was both envious and jealous. She was even more disgusted with her mother and Yen. Chapter 1595. Yen returned home with her makeup on. She saw her daughter sitting on the sofa with red and swollen eyes. It was obvious that she had been crying. She hurriedly walked over with heartache. Wen, what's wrong?" She walked to her side and sat down. Just as she was about to touch her, Wen avoided her with a look of disgust. Yen was stunned. "Wen, what's wrong with you?" and Wen looked up at the woman in front of her. She was in her 50s and had taken good care of herself. Her skin was still fair and delicate, but it couldn't hide the fine lines at the corners of her eyes and lips. Her eyes were very young, which could only be seen if she hadn't experienced the hardships of life. And Wen used to be very proud of her mother's youth and beauty. She was prettier than her classmates' parents. But now, looking at Yen like this, she was very annoyed. She said in a sharp tone, "As a woman who is about to enter old age, you dress up so beautifully every day. Are you going to seduce another rich man?" And Yan's gaze trembled. She looked at the daughter in her hands and couldn't seem to imagine that she would say such things to her. Actually, Enwen regretted saying it. But that bit of regret couldn't compare to the resentment in her heart. She continued, "Do you know? Today I was pointed at my nose and scolded. They said that I was chased out, that I was a poor woman who pretended to be a rich man's daughter. They said that I was a wild chicken who pretended to be a phoenix." The more she spoke, the more agitated she became. The tears that she had finally stopped came out again. And Wen almost cried. "Why can't I be Chong Minggang's daughter? Since you were with Chong Minggang, why did you find another man? Why did you have to give birth to me and suffer? Why do I have to suffer such humiliation when others are high and mighty while I'm just a wild child without a father?" And Yen felt her vision turn black. When she gave birth to Wen, she didn't deny that she wanted to use the child to force Chong Minggang. But after all, Wen was her flesh and blood. She really loved Wen. She spent most of the money Chong Minggang gave her on Wen. She sent her to a high-tuition private school, sent her to learn piano and dance, and took her on a trip every year. She was almost careful, trying her best to let her daughter enjoy everything that normal people of her age could enjoy. She had never known that her daughter had always thought this way. The daughter that she had carefully held in the palm of her hand actually viewed her mother in such a manner? And Yan's good mood disappeared without a trace. She didn't even have the chance to tell Enwen that she had put in a lot of effort to go out today. She had given a generous gift to a madam and helped Enwen get an easy and decent job. A fierce argument broke out between the mother and daughter. On the same day, Enwen took her mother's card and withdrew most of the money from it. She bought a plane ticket and flew to another city. By the time Yen found out, she couldn't even get through to her daughter's phone, and Wen had thrown her phone away. Gu Shengyin and the system looked on silently. She felt that she had great foresight, she didn't need to do anything at all. And Wen and Yen, this mother and daughter pair, could make their originally good lives a mess. Chapter 1596. Gu Shengyin's days were divided between the company and her family. Chong Minggang had been waiting for his daughter to ask him for help when she was flustered. However, it turned out that he was thinking too much. A few days ago, Gu Shengyin found it a little difficult because she was unfamiliar with the company. However, she quickly grasped all the resources of the Chong Group. Her decisiveness and unique vision in the business world attracted the attention of some of the older generations. Some of the shareholders of the Chong Group had initially expressed their support for her because of the Liu family. But now, they had to admit that even Gu Shengyin had the ability and charisma to convince people. She was neither arrogant nor rash. Although she was young, Gu Shengyin's ability to make big decisions made many old foxes in the business world admire her. The Liu family was worried that their granddaughter couldn't handle the situation and was ready to save the situation at any time. However, after seeing Gu Shengyin's performance, they felt that their worries were unnecessary. Liu Qingshan, on the other hand, had a gratified look on his face. Since Yuji has such a strong ability, this old man can rest assured. Indeed, a strong family background could only make others envious. However, her own ability could make others believe in her. His granddaughter was like this now. No matter what happened in the future, she wouldn't have a bad life. As the daughter-in-law of their family, the Chong family naturally paid attention to her. Gu Shengyin had made a lot of movements during this period. The He family obviously knew about it. Old Master, he expressed his admiration for Gu Shengyin's business methods. "I thought she was a dignified and generous person. I didn't expect her to be so decisive when it comes to important matters. I was wrong." Although he said that, everyone could see the admiration in his eyes. He was even more straightforward. I wonder if sister-in-law will be willing to come to my Huaxia group to test the water after she gets married. Many people were happy for Gu Xingyin. Obviously, Chong Minggang wasn't one of them. The stronger Gu Xingyin was, the more stable her position was. This meant that he didn't have a high chance of regaining his full power. This made Chong Minggang, who felt that he hadn't reached the age of retirement and couldn't let go of his full power, very unhappy. Every time Gu Xingyin returned home, there would be a huge argument between the father and daughter. For example, tonight. Originally, he was in a relatively cold and silent state. Suddenly, Chong Minggang put down his chopsticks and laughed coldly. I didn't expect my good daughter Yuji to be so powerful. Gu Xingyin slowly swallowed the food in her mouth before replying, it's all thanks to father's teachings. She was not afraid of Chong Minggang at all. The current Chong Minggang was only good at talking. When it came to arguing, Gu Xingyin believed that she would not lose to anyone. As expected, Chong Minggang was choked quite badly. He snorted coldly. I just didn't expect that my meticulous upbringing would raise an ingrate. Gu Xingyin put down the chopsticks in her hand. After being disturbed like this, she could forget about having any appetite. She had already bought an apartment near the company. It was time to have a showdown with Chong Minggang. Gu Xingyin looked at Chong Minggang quietly. Father, don't say things like ingrate. You know best what you've done all these years. She began to tell him everything one by one. Chapter 1597. Chong Minggang had an affair with An Yen before he married her mother. But he gave up An Yen for the support of the Lu family. But they didn't stop after they got married. His marriage with her mother was unfaithful from the beginning. He had been having an affair all the time. He always thought that An Wen was his daughter. He even thought about giving a part of his inheritance to his daughter after he passed away. After his wife Lu Qinghe passed away, he had many ideas about the shares in Chong Yuji's hands. Because his daughter Chong Yuji didn't listen to him and wanted to bring back his illegitimate daughter An Wen to suppress his daughter, pile by pile, piece by piece. There were even some things that even Chong Minggang forgot. Gu Xingyin said them one by one. Chong Minggang's eyes gradually widened. He looked at Gu Xingyin. You hired a private detective to investigate me? Gu Xingyin didn't answer him. She had the system, which was much more professional than a private detective. Gu Xingyin finally concluded, actually, I have always admired you, father. This was the truth. Chong Yuji's feelings for Chong Minggang were no less than Lu Qinghe's. That was why she reacted so strongly to his action of bringing back An Yen and her daughter. Gu Xingyin continued, but what did you do? Ungrateful? You used my mother's family background to develop the Chongming group to what it is today. But from the beginning to the end, you didn't have any true feelings for her. Who is the ungrateful one? You said that you raised me carefully, but in the blink of an eye, you brought back an illegitimate daughter to suppress me. Is this love for me? Gu Xingyin said with a sneer, the so-called reincarnation is good. Father, I'm afraid you don't know that you have been wearing a green hat on your head for more than 20 years. You raised someone else's daughter for more than 20 years, right? This was Chong Minggang's biggest weakness. He couldn't help but shout, shut up. How could Gu Xingyin shut up? She said, and Yen and her daughter were kicked out. I thought that if this was how it was in the future, we could live a good life. But you wanted to take the shares in my hands. She sneered, if I don't resist, do you think something will happen to me? Then you smoothly became the first inheritor of the inheritance? Chong Minggang's temples throbbed at her sarcastic words. His vision turned black, and he couldn't help but say again, stop talking. He had never thought that the things he had done would make him feel unbearable when others repeated them. Gu Xingyin's expression remained calm, as if she wasn't talking about herself. You can't take it anymore? I'm the one who has to bear all of this. Chong Minggang's vision finally turned black, and the world spun. Gu Xingyin stood up and shouted, call an ambulance. Father has fainted. The results of Chong Minggang's checkup came out that night. A sudden stroke caused by high blood pressure. What will happen after he wakes up? Gu Shengyin asked. The doctor looked at the young woman in front of him strangely. She claimed to be the patient's daughter, but there was no extra anxiety on her face. But this wasn't something a doctor like him could deal with. He said truthfully, the patient's condition is not very good. If he is better, he can sit in a wheelchair. But it is also very likely that he can only spend the rest of his life in bed. Chapter 95. Around 8 or 9 in the evening, the last 5 chapters of the day were updated. Chapter 1598. Gu Shengyin was silent for a moment when she heard this. The doctor felt that she couldn't understand the young lady in front of her. She stood there with her head slightly lowered. She was expressionless before, but now, with the pale light of the hospital corridor shining on the top of her head, there was a feeling of extreme sadness. This was Zhong Yuji's body, feeling sad for her father. No matter how many bad things he had done to her, for Zhong Yuji, he was still the father who held her high and rode a horse when she was young. She said in a low voice, "Please do your best and use the best medicine to make him better." The doctor nodded. He had heard too many such words. Every family member hoped that their loved ones could be well. But the final result was not something that could be decided by people. Gu Shengyin saw that Zhong Minggang was pushed into the ward. She felt a little stuffy, so she went outside to get some fresh air. As soon as she got some fresh air, she met an acquaintance. Zhong Cheng's stepmother, the second wife of the chairman of the Zhong family. When Mrs. Zhong saw Gu Shengyin, she was a little surprised, but after being stunned for a moment, she put on a smile on her face. No, I should call you Chairman Zhong now. Gu Shengyin didn't have a good impression of this woman, but she didn't hate her either. She nodded lightly, Mrs. Zhong. Mrs. Zhong didn't care that she was too cold at all. She asked with concern, "Chairman Zhong, you came to the hospital?" Gu Shengyin said, "Something happened to my father's health." Mrs. Zhong understood. She didn't say anything more. If it was said that the new chairman of the Zhong group had any relationship with her father, Mrs. Zhong definitely wouldn't believe it. If they really had a good relationship, would they use almost coercion to force him to step down? However, since ancient times, the winner was king and the loser was in the wrong. Gu Shengyin succeeded in taking the position and showed that her ability was not inferior to her father's or even slightly better. No one would say anything more. Mrs. Zhong said, "I'm here this time for our Zhong Cheng." When she said this, there wasn't any sadness on her face, only a little bit of emotion. This was one of the things that Gu Shengyin admired about this woman. She was not Zhong Cheng's biological mother, so she had never been close to her stepson. However, he had never treated him unfairly. Mrs. Zhong knew that in a wealthy family like the Zhong family, if she pretended to be protective of her stepson, not only would it be a thankless task, but many people would also suspect her motives. Therefore, from the very beginning, she had made her attitude very clear. She did not want to get close to him, and she did not treat him coldly. All these years, she and Zhong Cheng had always had an indifferent relationship, but it was also because of this that Zhong Cheng's father had always trusted her and doted on her daughter very much. When Mrs. Zhong spoke, she deliberately glanced at Gu Shengyin. When she saw that there was no expression on her face, she was relieved. Zhong Cheng has some mental problems. Originally, he was fine, but he might have been stimulated earlier and suddenly erupted. Now, the situation is not very good. When Mrs. Zhong said this, her gaze was fixed on Gu Shengyin. After all, she knew that Zhong Cheng's great stimulation had something to do with Gu Shengyin. When Zhong Cheng's father heard the news, he was so angry that he threatened to seek justice from the Zhong family. However, he was persuaded by Mrs. Zhong. Mrs. Zhong, who knew the whole story, felt that this matter had nothing to do with them. Chapter 1599. Mrs. Zhong even thought that Zhong Yuji, Zhong Cheng's ex-girlfriend, was a victim in this matter. However, Mr. Zhong, who was wholeheartedly attached to his son, had obviously lost his mind. He wanted to find trouble with the Zhong family. In the end, it was Mrs. Zhong who found out the identity of the man who injured Zhong Cheng, which made Mr. Zhong give up the idea. The He family was not someone the Zhong family could afford to offend. Even if the Zhong family gave up the plan to fight with the Zhong family, Mr. Zhong would still treat the Zhong family coldly whenever he saw them. He was different from her husband. Mrs. Zhong did not have much feelings for Zhong Cheng. In this matter, she did not have any ill feelings for the Zhong family. Therefore, she did not mind forming a good relationship with Gu Shengyin in private. If Zhong Cheng's mental state could not recover, then he would definitely not be able to inherit the company in the future. Under such circumstances, her daughter, as the only legitimate heir of the Zhong family, would naturally be able to fight for more benefits. Gu Shengyin was a little interested in what she said. What happened to Zhong Cheng? Mrs. Zhong looked around and made sure that no one was around. Then she slowly said, Zhong Cheng's mother, as you know, divorced my husband by agreement. That woman, her private life is a little indecent. When Mrs. Zhong said this, her expression was a little strange. Zhong Cheng's mother's matter was considered a big deal in the capital back then. She and Mr. Zhong's family were connected by marriage. Of course, they had no feelings for each other. After giving birth to an heir, they lived separately. It was not a serious matter for both sides to have a lover. Many wealthy families lived like this. However, this Mrs. Zhong was too strange. She had many strange hobbies. For example, she kept many lovers and played with them. She even recorded them with a camera as a memento. Then, once, when Zhong Cheng was only 8 years old, he accidentally saw these things when he went to his mother's villa to play. At that time, no one noticed the change in him. It was not until later, when Zhong Cheng began to be afraid of women and hated the touch of all women, that Mr. Zhong realized that something was wrong. He hired a psychiatrist for his son. After 2 years, the knot in Zhong Cheng's heart was untied. However, it was only a temporary solution. Zhong Cheng had been receiving treatment from a psychiatrist in private. It wasn't until he became an adult that he looked no different from a normal person. As a stepmother, Mrs. Zhong knew about these things, but she had to pretend that she didn't know anything. Originally, if Zhong Cheng was lucky, this symptom might not recur for the rest of his life. But it was clear that the experience of breaking up with Gu Shengyin had somehow triggered him. Gu Shengyin, hearing Mrs. Zhong's words, Gu Shengyin was speechless. To be honest, Chong Yuji didn't do anything that would cause Zhong Cheng's mental illness. It was normal for Zhong Cheng to be dumped. Now that he was in trouble, what did it have to do with her? Mrs. Zhong looked at her and quickly said, Of course, we all know that Zhong Cheng's illness has nothing to do with you, Director Zhong. It's just a coincidence. Gu Shengyin looked at Mrs. Zhong and smiled. Thank you for your understanding, Mrs. Zhong. This woman was a rare understanding person. Chapter 1600. Gu Shengyin went back and forth between the company and the hospital every day. When Zhongming finally woke up from the hospital bed, Gu Shengyin also received a message from the system. Su Wen and Zhong Cheng were together again. Gu Shengyin raised her eyebrows. Su Wen had gone out of town, and Zhong Cheng was receiving treatment at a local hospital. How did they meet? After the system's explanation, Gu Shengyin understood. Zhong Cheng's condition could not be treated effectively in this hospital, so Zhong Ming's father sent his son to a hospital in another city. There was a hospital in that city that was famous for its psychiatry department, and it might be of help to Zhong Cheng's condition. And one happened to be in that city. Coincidentally, when Zhong Cheng went out for a walk with his bodyguards, he met An Wen, who was wandering around aimlessly. Gu Shengyin. What an ill-fated relationship. What happened after that was even more bizarre. Zhong Cheng, who refused to get close to anyone because of his illness and had violent tendencies, was actually very tolerant of An Wen. This tolerance was reflected in many aspects. For example, he allowed An Wen to be within a meter of him, and he was even able to have dinner with her. He even felt that being with An Wen made his heart feel very peaceful. An Wen did not know about Zhong Cheng's condition, and thought that he was still the same as before. She saw this as an opportunity given to her by God, and used all her means to seduce Zhong Cheng. The two of them went back and forth, and they were stuck together again. Gu Shengyin. This was not logical. She asked the system in shock. Why is Zhong Cheng sick, but An Wen can break the norm? The system said, I don't know either. Maybe Zhong Cheng is sick, and An Wen is the cure? Gu Shengyin. This setting is really good. As she chatted with the system, she saw Zhong Ming's father open his eyes. Zhong Ming's father saw Gu Xingyin, and the argument between the two flashed in his mind. He immediately scolded, "Why are you standing here and being an eyesore? Get out of here." Gu Xingyin glanced at him and dutifully pressed the bell to call the doctors and nurses in. Soon, the people from the hospital came in to check on him. At this time, the father realized that he was lying on the bed and couldn't move. His lower body didn't listen to him at all. Faced with such a situation, his first reaction was to glare fiercely at Gu Xingyin. He glared angrily and said, "You evil woman, what have you done to me?" Gu Xingyin lowered her eyes. It seemed that there was no way for the two of them to communicate properly. Before she could say anything, the doctor beside her couldn't take it anymore. He stood up and said, "Mr. Chong, you had a stroke because of sudden high blood pressure. Now you have temporarily lost feeling in your legs. If you take good care of yourself, there is hope for you to recover." He looked at Gu Xingyin, who lowered her eyes and didn't speak. He impulsively added, "During the days when you were in a coma, your daughter came to see you every day. How could there be any overnight enmity between father and daughter?" Unfortunately, Zhong Ming's father was stunned by the news that he had a stroke. He didn't hear the rest of his words. He just moved his legs in disbelief and found that they didn't listen to him at all. He suddenly became agitated and used his hand to hammer his legs. As he hammered, he scolded, "I had a stroke. I am a cripple. Chong Yuji, are you happy now? No one will fight with you for the position anymore. You win." Chapter 1601. Gu Xingyin looked at Chong Ming Gang and suddenly lost interest in continuing to communicate with him. She turned to the doctor and said, "My father is a little emotional. I won't come to see him for the time being. Please take good care of him," she said quickly and left more decisively. Seeing her leave, Chong Ming Gang was even angrier. The doctor saw him like this and felt a headache. "Go and get the tranquilizer." Gu Xingyin sat on the bench downstairs of the hospital. Speaking of which, her mission in this world was basically completed. All the people who had hurt Zhong Yuji didn't get a good result. And then her daughter left the family with nothing. Zhong Cheng's mental illness acted up. Chong Ming Gang had a stroke and was paralyzed. She silently looked at the people coming and going at the entrance of the hospital and suddenly had a feeling of losing her target. Then, she felt a shadow pressing down on her head. There was a clear and distant lotus fragrance enveloping her. He Lu sat down beside her. "What are you thinking about? Why are you so fascinated?" He Lu reached out and held one of her hands tightly with his warm and broad palm. However, he slightly pressed his fingers and interlocked their fingers. Actually, what he didn't say was that her expression just now looked as if she had completely emptied her mind. He was a little flustered. Gu Xingyin's hand was held and a warm touch passed from her palm to her heart. The sudden melancholy and confusion just now disappeared without a trace. Her heart suddenly calmed down. She turned her head to look at the man beside her and smiled. "I miss you." Hearing this, He Lu smiled. He was the kind of man who rarely smiled, but he looked very good when he smiled. Then, He Lu was at the entrance of the hospital where people came and went. He didn't care about the eyes of others and gently kissed Gu Xingyin. This kiss was very light. He Lu simply sucked Gu Xingyin's lips and stepped back. "You looked very sad just now," He Lu said. Gu Xingyin was confused. "Did I?" Seeing her like this, He Lu was a little relieved. He asked, "How is uncle?" He asked Chong Ming Gang. Gu Xingyin said, "He had a stroke. He might be paralyzed." He Lu asked, "Should I go see him?" He was asking about Gu Xingyin. Knowing her relationship with his father, he respected Gu Xingyin's opinion on this matter. Gu Xingyin hesitated for a moment and refused. "I was just chased out by him. He's a little agitated, so it's better not to agitate him." He Lu stopped talking. The two sat for a while before Gu Xingyin asked, "Why did you suddenly come back?" He Lu remembered the purpose of his visit today. He looked at Gu Xingyin and said, "Because I've applied for marriage leave." At this moment, he lowered his head to look at Gu Xingyin. At the same time, Gu Xingyin also raised her head to look at him. Their eyes met. Gu Gu Shengyin was the first to look away. So? He Lu seemed to chuckle. He said, so, we can prepare for the wedding, Mrs. He. Gu Shengyin was also amused by this statement. She said seriously, you don't even have a proposal and you want to marry me? As soon as she finished speaking, He Lu pulled out a box from nowhere like a magic trick. I've already prepared it. He opened the gift box in his hand in front of Gu Shengyin. Inside was a pair of very exquisite platinum and diamond rings. Gu Shengyin couldn't help laughing. Why haven't I seen a proposal with a pair of rings? He Lu said in all seriousness, for things like rings, of course it's better to have them in pairs. Chapter 1602. Gu Shengyin was speechless at such a unique proposal. Well, she actually quite liked it. He Lu picked up the smaller ring. Come on, reach out your hand. Gu Shengyin obediently reached out her hand. Wait a minute. She saw something engraved on the inside of the ring. She picked it up and took a closer look. A small Lu was quietly sitting there. Gu Shengyin looked at He Lu and smiled. Why didn't you tell me? He Lu's ears were a little red. There's nothing to say. Gu Shengyin's face showed a smile. She obediently let He Lu put the ring on her finger. After putting it on, she also picked up another ring and put it on He Lu's finger carefully. On the ring belonging to He Lu, Gu Shengyin also saw a small U in the inner circle. He Lu held her hand, and they quietly leaned against each other. After a long time, He Lu said, we are already preparing at home. Yuji, are you ready? No one answered. He Lu looked sideways and found that the person beside him had already fallen asleep on his shoulder. There was a yellowish sunlight shining on her face through the shadow of the tree. He Lu saw the blue shadow under Gu Shengyin's eyes. Gu Shengyin didn't have an easy time these days. She had to deal with the company's affairs during the day and come to the hospital after work. Usually, it was close to midnight when she returned home. Then she took a shower and washed up, which took a lot of time. And she had to get up early the next day. She hadn't had a good rest for a long time. He Lu looked at her quietly until that small piece of mischievous sunlight moved to her eyes. He reached out his hand and gently stopped it. When Gu Shengyin woke up, she found that she was in a strange place. The decoration style of the room was very simple and neat. Everything was placed in its proper position. Obviously, the owner of this room was a very self-disciplined man. Gu Shengyin subconsciously raised her watch to check the time, only to find that her wrist was empty. She looked around and found it on the bedside table. 6:30 p.m. She thought about it. When she met He Lu at the hospital, it was 4:30 in the afternoon. She actually slept for 2 hours? Most importantly, she was brought all the way to the bed, but she didn't wake up at all. However, the feeling of having a good sleep was indeed comfortable. Gu Shengyin got up and opened the door. An enticing aroma of food floated out from the kitchen. Just then, He Lu walked into the restaurant with a plate of food. When he saw Gu Shengyin, he smiled. I was just about to wake you up? Gu Shengyin looked at He Lu. His sleeves are rolled up high, revealing his muscular forearms. He's wearing a dark blue apron, which softens his temperament. Seeing that she was still in a daze, He Lu smiled helplessly. When he came out again, the apron had been taken off and the food had been placed on the table. Don't be in a daze. Come and eat. Gu Shengyin obediently walked over and sat down. He Lu reached out and scooped a bowl of soup for her. Come and try this. Gu Shengyin took a sip. The taste was very delicious, which was a little beyond Gu Shengyin's expectations. She praised without hiding it. It's delicious. Then, she looked at He Lu. I didn't expect you to know how to cook. He Lu just picked up a chicken wing and put it in her bowl. Never underestimate any man who has been a soldier. A man who has been a soldier has good stamina. Chapter 1603. Gu Shengyin obediently finished the chicken wing. It was the first time for her to go to He Lu's house, and the first time for He Lu to cook for her. But they didn't feel anything wrong at all. They seemed to have a natural tacit understanding, as if they had been together for many years just like now. After dinner, He Lu washed the fruit for Gu Shengyin, and he went to the kitchen to clean up. Gu Xingyin glanced at the man who went to work consciously. She pursed her lips and smiled secretly. "What are you laughing at?" The sofa beside her sank. It was He Lu who sat down. Gu Xingyin put a piece of honeydew into his mouth. "I'm laughing. It is said that the youngest general in the Republic is washing his hands and making soup for me. Even if I tell others about it, I'm afraid that few people will believe it." She was just joking. She didn't expect He Lu to answer seriously. "I don't think anyone will believe it." Gu Xingyin was stunned for a moment, and then she couldn't help laughing. He Lu looked at the woman who was laughing with her hands on her belly with indulgence. She was very beautiful, bright and beautiful. This kind of unscrupulous laughter was most suitable for her. Although he didn't know why she was suddenly so happy, He Lu was still happy for her. Gu Xingyin laughed for a while and then stopped. She looked at He Lu. He Lu also looked at her with his head tilted. She said softly, "Thank you, He Lu." He Lu's eyes paused. He asked her, "Thank me for what?" Gu Xingyin shook her head and buried her head in He Lu's arms. This embrace was very warm, very safe, and very familiar. She took a deep breath and suddenly said, "I can't wait to be your bride." He Lu's eyes suddenly darkened. He reached out and gently stroked Gu Xingyin's soft hair. "Why do you suddenly say that?" Gu Xingyin felt very comfortable when his hands stroked her long hair. She couldn't help but rub against him. She had only slept for 2 hours in the afternoon, but now that she was full, she actually felt sleepy again. "No reason, I just suddenly feel that I really like you." Gu Xingyin lay in his arms and said with a smile. The next moment, she felt her body being flipped over. Then, he shifted his gaze and his body sank. Gu Xingyin was half lying on the sofa, while He Lu was lying on top of her. "Hasn't anyone told you that it's dangerous to say such things to a man who likes you?" He Lu narrowed his eyes and asked her. Gu Xingyin was not afraid at all. She reached out and took the initiative to wrap her arms around his neck, pulling him closer to her. The tips of their noses were touching, and they could smell each other's breath. "Oh, then tell me, what are the dangers?" He Lu's gaze deepened. "For example, losing your innocence." Gu Xingyin couldn't help laughing out loud. He Lu's words were really too interesting. He Lu looked at the woman under him. There was a smile in her eyes, and she didn't look worried at all. "Are you really not worried at all?" Gu Xingyin said with a smile, "I'm not worried because I know you won't do that." Such a matter-of-fact tone made He Lu's heart tremble. He asked in a low voice, "Why are you so sure that I won't?" "You have to know that a man's self-control can never be trusted." Gu Xingyin looked at him. "But you are different. He Lu, to me, you are different from anyone else." Chapter 1604. From Gu Xingyin's point of view, she could see He Lu's eyes very clearly. She could easily see He Lu's hidden desire for her. It was a very normal thing for a man to have desire for the woman he liked or even loved deeply. On the contrary, if a man could still be as calm as an old monk in such a situation, there were only 2 possibilities: either he couldn't do it, or he was ruthless to you. He Lu was obviously neither of the 2. He had desire, but he held it back. Gu Xingyin knew that he wouldn't do anything because she knew this man. A man like He Lu wouldn't fall in love easily. But if he really fell in love with a woman, he would hold her in the palm of his hand and put her at the top of his heart. At least, he wouldn't casually take her at such a time, in such a place. Especially when they were about to get married. As a man with a little obsessive-compulsive disorder, compared to temporary relief, what He Lu wanted more was a perfect wedding night that both of them would never forget. Hearing Gu Xingyin's words, He Lu fell silent. After a long time, he bent down and buried his head in Gu Xingyin's neck. He thought that God must have seen that he had been too lonely for so many years, so a woman like Zhong Yuji appeared by his side. She had only been with him for a few months, but she knew him better than anyone else. She could easily guess all his thoughts. She and he were a couple who were born to be compatible. As Gu Xingyin expected, she stayed at He Lu's house that night, but nothing happened between the 2 of them. The next day, He Lu drove her to the company personally. For the next period of time, He Lu seemed to be very busy. Gu Xingyin knew what he was busy with, So she gave herself a break. After all, it was their wedding. She couldn't really do nothing. When everything was almost ready, Gu Xingyin went to see Chong Minggang. When she entered the ward, Chong Minggang was sitting on the bed with glasses on, reading a philosophy book in his hand. He seemed to have accepted the fact that he would be paralyzed for the rest of his life. In fact, even if he did not accept it, there was nothing he could do to change this outcome. When he saw Gu Xingyin, he was unusually calm. Gu Xingyin placed the papers in her hand on the table in the ward and found a chair not far from the bed to sit down. Father seems to be in good spirits. Chong Minggang did not put down the book in his hands. Life has to be lived by itself. I still want to live for a few more years. The two of them fell into silence. Halcyon had just finished reading a page when he finally raised his head. You came to find me for something, right? He had been thinking a lot these days and had probably figured it out. It was not hard to understand why Gu Xingyin would hate her father. Putting aside the things he had been working so hard on, and thinking about the things he had done from a different perspective, Chong Minggang suddenly felt that he didn't have that much resentment towards this daughter of his. No matter what, she was his only remaining blood relative in this world. Gu Xingyin did not beat around the bush. I am getting married, father. Hearing Gu Xingyin's unfamiliar address, Chong Ming seemed to realize for the first time that this daughter of his had not called him father for a long time. She had always been a cold and formal father. How could he not have realized it before? Chapter 1605. He asked, get married? With who? He remembered He Lu, who came to visit his family. Although he was surprised, Chong Minggang still asked, He Lu. Gu Xingyin nodded. Chong Ming thought for a while and said, he is a good candidate for a husband, but he paused and finally said, as long as you are happy. Gu Xingyin sat on the chair and didn't say anything. Chong Minggang couldn't find anything to say for a while. He thought absent-mindedly, when did I become so distant with this daughter of mine? In the end, Gu Xingyin asked, are you going to my wedding, father? This was the purpose of her visit today. According to her, it didn't matter if Chong Minggang, who was her father in name, went or not. But according to Chong Mingyuji's thoughts, she probably hoped to receive the blessings of her family on the most important day of her life. Chong Minggang agreed. Gu Xingyin exhaled. She stood up and said, I will come to pick you up next week. Chong Minggang nodded. He could see that his daughter wanted to leave. He wanted to say that she could sit here for a while. Even if she didn't say anything, just sitting here was good enough. But he didn't say this sentence in the end. Gu Xingyin turned and walked out of the ward. Chong Minggang looked at the door of the ward in a daze. After a long time, he turned his head and looked at the fresh flowers in the vase next to him. He lowered his head silently. Because of the true identity of the He family, He Lu and Gu Xingyin's wedding wasn't widely publicized. But although it wasn't widely publicized, it wasn't any less ostentatious. If someone with sharp eyes was here, they would find that many people who came to attend the wedding were people who often spoke on the international news. As a company that cooperated with the Chong family, the Zhong family also came. Mr. Zhong didn't come because he was busy with work. Although Mrs. Zhong felt that her husband's behavior was stupid, she couldn't persuade him. She could only bring her daughter here. As for Zhongqing, he was still living happily with Wen in that small city. Mrs. Zhong arrived at the banquet hall. Although she was mentally prepared, when she saw the familiar guests, she couldn't help but gasp. With the Zhong family's status, she was considered to be a popular figure at some of the business gatherings. But here, Mrs. Zhong turned her head and whispered to her daughter, who had just reached adulthood, Fei, stay by my side later and don't be in the limelight. Our Zhong family can't afford to offend the people here. She had always been very practical when it came to educating her daughter. She had never taught her daughter to be a frog at the bottom of a well. Compared to ordinary families, the Zhong family was very good. However, in front of the real top wealthy families, they were not much different from ordinary people. Zhong Fei was a sweet-looking girl. She glanced at the guests in the hall, nodded and whispered, "Don't worry, Mom, I know what I'm doing." Mrs. Zhong patted her daughter's hand in relief. "Mom has always been at ease with you." She had no feelings for Mr. Zhong. The proudest thing in her life was that she had given birth to such an obedient and sensible daughter. Chapter 1606. As the main character of this wedding, Gu Shengyin naturally received attention from all directions. Many guests were secretly puzzled. Logically speaking, this bride's family wasn't ranked high in the capital. In the past, many families that were much stronger than her family had revealed the intention of marriage to the He family, but without exception, they were all rejected. They really couldn't understand why He Lu had waited for so long, but in the end, they had chosen such an ordinary rich girl. However, they would only think about this in their hearts. If they showed it on their faces, they would be fools. He Lu and Gu Shengyin didn't care about what other people thought. These people had nothing to do with their lives, so why should they care about them? The two exchanged rings and tokens. As the bride's father, Zhong Minggang sat in the front seat in a wheelchair. Next to him were He Lu's parents. Old Master He was sitting in the main seat. He came personally to let everyone see how satisfied the He family was with Gu Shengyin as their daughter-in-law. Mrs. Zhong and Zhong Feifei chose a position that wasn't very conspicuous. Zhong Feifei looked at the dazzling newlyweds on the stage and her heart was filled with envy. "Mom, Sister Yuji looks so happy," she whispered. Because of Zhong Yuji's relationship with Zhong Cheng, she and Zhong Yuji were familiar with each other and had a good relationship. Mrs. Zhong looked at the woman who almost became her daughter-in-law on the stage and sighed in her heart. In the end, it was Zhong Cheng who didn't have good fortune. She was an experienced person. She could tell that the famous general He's every move was full of care and intimacy for Gu Shengyin. This showed that the two had a good relationship. The attitude of the He family also showed that they were very satisfied with Gu Shengyin. She smiled and said to her daughter, "Feifei, in the future, you will be as happy as your sister Yuji." Zhong Feifei blushed and didn't say anything. When the guests finally left, Gu Shengyin couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Although it didn't hurt to stand for a day in special high heels, it was still very uncomfortable. He Lu, who had been paying attention to his wife, quickly asked, "Are you not feeling well?" As soon as he said that, he received several mocking looks. Although most of the guests had left, He Qi and his wife, as well as Gu Shengyin's cousins, these young people had not left yet. As for Old Master He, Father He, Mother He, Chong Minggang, and the other elders, they left after giving the gifts. They knew very well that with them around, the youngsters wouldn't be able to let go. Gu Shengyin said calmly, "My feet don't feel well." As soon as she finished speaking, He Lu frowned and said, "I knew it. Wearing such high shoes, you must feel uncomfortable standing for a day. I asked you to change to a lower pair, but you refused, saying that they don't look good." Gu Shengyin widened her eyes. Of course, she wouldn't change it. This was the most important day in a woman's life. So what if she felt a little uncomfortable? It had to be perfect. Cough cough. He Qi coughed dryly. "I say, He Lu, your brothers are still here? What do you plan to do with us?" He Lu glanced at him. He knew that He Qi said that on purpose. He glanced at the other people's faces. As expected, they all looked like they were waiting for a good show. He Lu pursed his lips and suddenly leaned over. Gu Shengyin felt her vision change. He Lu had lifted her up in his arms. Chapter 1607. However, although Gu Shengyin was complaining in her heart, her body was very comfortable. It had to be said that being able to eat porridge made by her lover in the morning could make her feel good all day. He Lu was a perfect husband. Gu Shengyin's aunts were a little worried at first, but after coming over to take a look once or twice, they all expressed that their niece's judgment of people was simply superb. It was one thing for a man like He Lu to have a high position and power, but what was rare was that he respected and loved his wife so much. Where could she find another husband like him? Considering He Lu's vacation, the two of them didn't go on a honeymoon. Instead, they lived a sweet life in their newly built small family. Occasionally, they would be called over by their respective elders for a meal. Their wedding wasn't spread around. By the time Zhong Cheng and Enwen found out about it, He Lu had already returned to the army. Enwen returned to her old days. Zhong Cheng would grant her almost every request. Want to buy clothes? Want a branded bag? No problem. Want to go on a trip? No way. And Wen didn't notice that something was wrong with Zhong Cheng. She thought that he didn't allow her to go on a trip because he liked her and didn't want her to be far away from him. She even felt pleased with herself for this. So what if she wasn't the daughter of a rich family? Looking at Zhong Cheng now, wasn't the possibility of her becoming Mrs. Zhong too high? She had tried to tell Zhong Cheng that she wanted to be with him forever. Forever! A dark light flashed across Zhong Cheng's eyes when he heard this. And Wen saw that he didn't have any intention of objecting. She was secretly happy and quickly nodded. Zhong Cheng hugged her with one hand and played with her hair with the other. I'll call my father and tell him that I want to marry you. Zhong Cheng didn't hesitate at all. He felt that Wen was his only salvation now. As long as she stayed by his side, he wouldn't go crazy and lose his mind. When he said this, Mr. Zhong was silent for a long time. During this period of time, he had a more specific understanding of Zhong Cheng's mental condition. When he heard Zhong Cheng's request, the first thing that came to his mind was the words of the attending physician. The patient cannot be stimulated in any way in the future. Otherwise, he might not be able to wake up again. How could a person who could not be stimulated by anything become the successor of such a large group like the Zhong group? All right. Zhong Cheng smiled as he shared the news with the overjoyed Wen. Little did he know that his father had already decided his fate. Zhong Cheng never thought that if his father continued to treat him as the successor, how could he allow him to marry Wen, a woman with a dubious background? When Wen heard Zhong Cheng's words, her first thought was not to share the news with her mother, but to Gu Xingyin. She thought that if she returned to the capital this time, she would definitely go and see Zhong Yuji. Hadn't she always looked down on him? But now she was going to marry Zhong Cheng. In the future, Wen's identity as the young madam of the Zhong family would not be much different from that of the eldest daughter of the Zhong family. She almost couldn't wait to see Zhong Yuji's expression when she saw her. Wen didn't expect that when she went to inquire about Zhong Yuji, she would get the news that she had become the wife of Major General He. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.